Alright, hello everybody. It's later in the afternoon on July 5th. Actually, it's really only around 12 o'clock. And I was very encouraged by the earlier firing of the terracotta tiles. One of the things that I was thinking of is that actually on this property here, there's actually several different color clays. And so that got me to thinking. I had been thinking before that there's a low-lying creek that runs through the back of the property, and I thought, well, you know what? Maybe it'd be cool to go ahead and get some different color clay and fire that and see what that looks like. Will it be red? Will it be a different color of red? Perhaps with making the gas-fired cob kiln, maybe I would be able to take and mix up this color tile with a different color terracotta tile, which might be neat. Or maybe you might want to use that kind of clay for another type of pottery. So I figure, I've been thinking about this for a while. Maybe it's time to go get some clay and try it out. It's a little bit of a process to get back there, but I figured I'd take you all along with me, and you'll see why it's a little of a pain to get to and why I haven't really wanted to go until now to go get it. So sorry about the camera work in the last couple videos. I'm pretty new at shooting and filming things that I'm doing, and so I really gonna have to get better at it, obviously. So now to get back to the creek. Used to be a pathway through here, but it's been so long since my nephew played in his little tree house back here that it's pretty overgrown. I think there's quite a bit of poison ivy. So I actually put on some long pants and shoes, even though it's kind of a warm day. So let's take a walk back through the woods here. Okay. It's really beautiful back here. You can see it's quite of a bit of a drop off to the area where the creek is. Now there's like a kind of a, I don't know if you guys can see it back there, but there's kind of a pond down there. And that's really just kind of overflow from water throughout the neighborhood. I think it's filtered down through here. That's really what the creek, this is kind of steep here. This is kind of why I don't like to come down here very often. Oh, we made it. I got a low-lying branch here. I wonder if I need to maybe get that out of the way. Oh, it's not too bad. Oh, it's pretty rotten too. All right, the pathway's open again. So yeah, anyway, there's a pond down there, and then there's a raised kind of like little island section over there. But I've always liked coming down here because, like I said, there's a spot where, well, you know what? I think that blue bucket was one that I had used in the past and forgot down here. And I think it's blown down into the creek. But yeah, so I like coming down here. One thing I notice, I don't know how well you guys can see it down there, but that red is like an iron oxide of some sort, I think. And so I've thought about even maybe harvesting some of that and trying to use it into a glaze. But you can see the clay down here is a much grayer clay. So I thought, I'd like to maybe try to harvest some of this and see if it's worth using. I definitely am very interested in clays that I don't know, kind of an angle we can get here. I'm definitely interested in clays that you can find locally, and trying to use that one because it's cost effective to do so. You don't have to be constantly getting new clay sent in and waiting for it to come. You can just go get it, start processing it yourself. So anyway, yeah, so I figured, maybe I'll climb down there. Hopefully I won't sink in too much, and get some clay to bring back, and we'll process it and see what it looks like. So, not really sure how well I'm going to come out in this. I really want to make sure that if I come down, I can get back up. Although this log is kind of nice, that it's here, that I can kind of stand on. Like I said, I don't want a whole ton of this until I know that it's really going to be good to use. Although it is much purer clay. There's a lot less rock and gravel in it. Actually, it's really beautiful clay. I don't know if I can show it to you, but it's a real pure, much purer clay. I mean, that's with a little bit of effort, that could almost probably be thrown. I mean, there's just so little sand and stuff like that in it. Now, there's probably quite a bit of silt. We get a lot of silt, I know, when I've processed this. And basically the way I process clay is I take this, put it in a 5-gallon bucket of water, 5-gallon bucket, and add water, and break everything up with my fingers until it's very dissolved. And at that point, because clay is lighter than water, lighter than the sand very quickly, within a couple minutes, maybe like no more than 5 minutes, will sink to the bottom of the bucket. Whereas the clay, because it's a finer particle, it's actually floating suspended in the water. So in order to process, even pretty sandy, gritty clay bearing soil, you basically break it up, and then you start to slowly transfer one 5-gallon bucket of the clay water into another until you start getting down to the sand. And once you start getting down to the sand, you can either dump it out, or sometimes I probably a little more labor intensive than what I should be doing with my time, but I usually will put a little bit more water in there, stir it up, and see if I can get any more of the clay out of there, and then keep trying to pour that off until I get down to the sand. At that point, there's still quite a bit of sand in the water that you've transferred, so I let it settle again, and then transfer it back. I clean out the first bucket. Now it's clean and empty, and now I'll take that second bucket and dump it back into the first bucket, and that will continually get more and more sand out. Now, silt is another proposition because it doesn't seem to sink as well as the sand does. So I have actually usually to get the major debris out of my clay, and I apologize, actually, before I start transferring it back and forth between the buckets, to get the bigger sticks and rocks and stuff like that out, I usually take a colander, like a regular colander at the kitchen. Of course, not one that I would want to use in the kitchen over again, but use one of those colanders and strain and get the bigger rocks and things like that. So it's already finer by the time I start pouring the clay water back and forth. But then to get the last bit of silt and things like that out, I usually use a very fine mesh screen. Honestly, I don't know what the actual mesh size is on it, because it's actually was used as a coffee filter. I wouldn't necessarily recommend using that. Again, I'm pretty new at the clay thing. I've been thinking about actually buying some screens that people actually use for refining soils. But I just used what was on hand, and it was an old it was like an old metal screened coffee filter. And so I would actually say maybe that was a little too fine, because it takes quite a bit of work with all that silt settling in to get the water to process through. So it's a lot more time consuming than it really probably should be. So I said, you watch other people who do things like this. They'll talk about what size meshes that they use for, like, getting chunks out of glazes and things like that. So I'm imagining it'd probably be more like that, but I don't know an exact screen size to tell you, so you have to do a little research. But anyway, with this, there'd be some obviously silt and sand in there, but man, there's a lot of just good clay here. I mean, and you can take it, when you can take it like this, and you can just squeeze it, and I mean, it's just keeps its shape. You know there's a lot of clay in that soil. So again, And actually, as it dried on my finger, it did dry quite a bit more tan. So maybe it will be very similar to what I have at the house, but at least there's a really good source of clay here. Once I've used up the deposit that was left on the side of the yard. So again, I'm just gonna get some of this, and I might even, again, maybe try to harvest a little bit of this rusty looking, almost like an iron oxide. I'm not sure if that's what it is or not, but it might be iron oxide, and I know that that's used in a lot of pottery. So I might even try to harvest some of that. But yeah, I've been kind of tempted, because I know this looks anyway, at least when it's wet, as a much grayer color clay than what we have up and further in the yard. So I would like to maybe make a few things out of it and see if it's something else I'd like to use. Okay. Probably should have brought a bigger shovel. But again, I don't want to get too crazy until I know what I'm working with and if it's something I want to continue to use. But it's really, it looks like a really nice clay. So a lot of times they say that you can find clay, riverbeds, creeks, things like that is a good place to look for clay. It's very gray in color. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see maybe what kind of tiles I can make out of this, or again, if I like the color, maybe make some pottery out of it. Yeah, man, it's really good quality clay, it feels like. It's interesting, there's, again, I doubt you can see it. Maybe if I bring you into the sunlight here. There's actually a lot of flecks of what look like iron oxide or something like that in it already. And it's funny, now that we're in the light, you probably can see better, but I can't see my screen so well, so I don't know if it's coming out, but boy. So there's a lot of gray, but there's also a lot of what looks like iron. I'm not sure what that will do for the clay, but as I said, I'd like to maybe grab a few chunks of that really strong, thick iron that's down there and maybe make a slip, or I don't know if you can make a glaze out of it. Again, I'm very new at a lot of this stuff. I've seen a lot of things on YouTube, but again, the technicalities of how to make different things I'm not really that sure of, but you do a little research. YouTube's a fun little thing that you can find somebody who's probably doing something that you want to do and knows how to do it. So anyway, let's take this back over here, put it in the bucket, and then I'll ask myself, do I really want to go down there and try to get maybe a spoon or a shovel full of that red stuff that's down there. It's over several places. Let me get this off first. Gotta clean this shovel, spade, trowel, whatever you want to call it. All right. Again, this is what I've harvested. Not a ton, but again, probably enough to do a trial and see if it's worth getting any more of it. But so, not a bad little adventure to take in the woods. But I said we'll make some tiles out of it and see what it looks like.